Thanks for tuning in to the Just Go Play podcast, where we look to develop and promote a positive youth sports experience. As always, we are available for speaking and private engagements and can be reached at info@justgoplay.ca. You can also catch full video versions of our podcast on our YouTube channel. And don't forget to visit us at justgoplay.ca. Enjoy the episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Just Go Play podcast. I'm your host, Daryl Devenish, also known as Coach D. I'm here with my two guest hosts, Taryn Lipschitz and Matt Young. Well, we got an interesting show for you today. We don't have a guest, but we're about to dive into a topic that's on everyone's mind right now. We're going to talk about the return of professional sports and the impact it's going to have on the economy, on youth sports, on the athletes. Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? Or are these guys just doing this because they need to make some dough? I'm going to start off. Matt, what do you think? What's your thoughts? First of all, how you doing, buddy?
Good, thanks. Yeah, it's been a great period of time. People are gradually going back, on the heels of what we're talking about. Return to sport is happening in small, manageable units. So it's going to be an interesting time for people. And like you said, people have a lot of questions. Or is this too soon? Is this not too soon? But we're doing great. So
awesome. T, you good?
I'm great, Daryl. It's great to see, people being outside, being active, everyone getting really excited about what's going on. I think there's been some positive changes in the world. I think there's also been some places that are trying to get ahead and relive their old life too quickly. And we've seen some places sort of have to go back in time and be a little stricter, especially I think a lot of what's going on in the States.
100%.
I think as a whole world, we're kind of all learning from each other and trying to manage this the best way possible. And I'm really excited to get into the topic today.
Yes, so am I. I'm pumped for sports. I ain't gonna lie. Matt, let's start with you because you're a good starting pitcher. What's your thoughts on the return of these professional sports right now? Where's your head?
Well, I think the NBA and the NHL with their bubbles and having them in bubbles and trying to limit the amount of risk and exposure have done a better job than as we're seeing Major League Baseball and some of the amateur sport organizations. I think it's irresponsible to just return to play, as Taryn alluded to, like just going back to the way everything always was. Okay, we got this. Like we haven't got a vaccine for this virus yet. This isn't something that you can take out your gun or your police force and we killed the virus. The virus is communicated and transmitted through contact. So that has significant implications. So I think that, the NBA and again, the NHL, I think they've invested a good amount of time and energy actually listening to the professionals. If we do bring back sport, this is the phase it should start in. This is what we should be doing. We should be canceling this. We should be doing that. It's going to be interesting to see how the NFL returns because, you've got a lot of players and they're lined up right across from each other and they're in contact. So, that's going to be interesting as well. So from the strictly, the virus side and the physical side of things, I think that, as leagues, we have to take that level of responsibility seriously. I think that some of the professional leagues have done a good job of starting because that's what a lot of the amateur and lower leagues and associations will follow. They'll follow that example. So if we set a bad example out of the outset, they'll just go, well, these guys are doing it, so we're going to do it too. Number two, I think that there isn't enough. Having said that, I don't think there's enough consistency and leadership saying this is what we're doing. I think everyone's doing their own different thing, which I think is dangerous. And I'll give you an example, Daryl and Taryn. I have a friend who coaches and they have at their organization, they've got the hula hoops, they've got the mask, they've got the distancing, they've got all the protocols in place. And, they look outside the door across the field and there's everyone just playing together. They're playing, tag and football together and football being soccer together. There is no distancing. So I think the policing of it is going to be challenging. I know a lot of, in Canada, we've done a lot of let's rely on the education before we have to, and use the carrot before we have to come in with the stick and the fines and all of that stuff, which I think is good. But Again, people are their own worst enemy, as we've seen in a couple of states and a couple of provinces. And so we're going to need at some point to come up with somebody in a leadership position that says, this is what's happening. It's happening for everybody, so that everybody has that, is on the same footing. I'm not sure why at the grassroots level, everyone's rushing back. I'm not sure what they think they're missing out on. I'm dubious that there will be a fall college sports season, given the incidences of COVID and the spread in the United States, and their inability to flatten it. So I think that's good, which begs the question for me anyway, and I don't know about you two, but what the hell is everyone rushing back for? What do they think they're missing? My other concern, which is a big concern, is that you look at the kids and you look at some of the groups and organizations that are returning early. It's all those groups and organizations that can afford the personal trainers, that can afford the private sessions, that can afford the academies. It's not the house league players. It's not the marginalized kids. It's not the parks and recs groups. And for me, that's disturbing and alarming, because when we eventually do get back to playing in an environment that's more controlled and safe, which we will, what's going to happen to all those people? Are they going to have found something else? Is that gap going to be just too wide between the haves and the have-nots to make up? And are these people going to want to return to grassroots sports? Which, Daryl, feeds into your question. If you're not I think it's a 6 multiple. If you've played a sport, you become a fan of the sport. So are the pro leagues doing the right thing? Is that setting the right example? That's above my pay grade to figure out. I guess we're going to have to wait and see. We're going to have to wait and see what the audience says and what the fans say. But my biggest thing would be, what do the fans want? We know what the owners want. We know what the players want, and that's tied into more of an economic driver. But what do the actual fans want? Do they want to watch, hockey in the middle of August? Do they want to see an abbreviated NBA schedule with no fans and no fanfare in the crowd? Do they want that? I'm not sure. I'm sure that the experts at those levels have weighed in on that. I hope they have. And so it'll be interesting to see. And secondly, fans first. What do the players want? You're seeing players opt out of seasons, opt out of playing because of concerns. I mean, I would be very reticent to go back in and start playing if I was immunocompromised or had someone in my family that I was concerned about. What about those guys? So I know that's a lot to say, but I think that sets the table for what we're going to talk about today in all facets. So back to you two.
Great points. T, what do you got? What's on your mind?
And you know what, Matt, I really have to agree with you. I think these pro athletes and these sport organizations are role models for so many others. So it's really their opportunity to say, we're going to do it this way, and we're going to do it in the safest way possible for our athletes and our coaches. And, it's not just the athletes that are being involved. It's the coaches, it's the supplementary professions that help them. There's doctors on site, there's massage therapists, there's different treatments and specialists that are on site. So you're not just putting, if there's, 25 people on a team at risk, you're putting a larger circle. I do agree. I think it's better these sport organizations that have created bubbles, if they are being strict to those bubbles and they're testing everyone and they're only letting those that are testing negative stay in that bubble and be part of it, that's great. But you also have, hotel staff coming in and out. You have potential fans that some organizations have expanded to let into, some groupies, which I think is a really terrible way, because now you're expanding those bubbles even more and the exposure. I think there's also the opportunity for athletes to step up as role models and make their stance and have their voices be heard, because they're not necessarily being overspoken by advertising and campaigns and traveling and all these other things. I think from a game perspective, having them all living in a place, not traveling anymore, not being, having as many distractions, maybe their game might be improved. That'll be interesting to see. I think some organizations are going to really need to look at this and say, are we doing the right thing? Are we doing this because we're being greedy? Do we just want fans to be tuning in so that we're making money in certain places? It's people's lives at stake. So I think it's really scary. And
you know what? Keep going. I got that.
Yeah, no, and I think with everything that's gone on in the world recently, I've seen some teams take some really strong stances on how they feel about racism and politics. And, you kind of hope that they can use some of their power for better, and to be able to use it as a platform to have controversial discussions, but in a constructive way that we're seeing people stand up for what they believe in, and really holding them accountable as well to being better people, not just athletes, but better people as well. So I'm interested to see sort of how they will take their stances as a role model and use that.
Well, I'm going to run with what you're talking about as role models, and not just the players, but the whole organizations. As Matt said, everyone's looking to these guys for leadership. You know, the organizations, the NHL and the NBA that have done the bubble, like, it seems tight. It's like they're serious. Like, these guys, these pro athletes have had to make sacrifices, and they're going to have to make adjustments in order for this to be successful and stick by the rules. I think if they can show that, and they can't forget, they got to be grateful. They're privileged people. Like, we are making exceptions so these guys can play and earn money. Now, we're going to talk about the economy, but this is helping a lot of people in that field. The guys that works the stadiums, the people that are in the organizations, the people that clean the place. But they have to, as going back to the role models, these guys have a great opportunity to be leaders for youth sports, for organizations below them, to go back into communities, like that kind of discipline. Like, Matt, you follow me when I say that?
Yeah, for sure. I don't disagree with that at all. I would say one counter argument to the money that's being spent and the economics of it, and then not to your point, but to a point we hear a lot is, we got to get the economy back on track. This does affect a lot of people, but you look at Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, who basically shut down. The virus is transmitted from person to person. It's host to host. If you don't have the hosts, then you don't have the transmission, and the virus weeds itself out and kills itself. So you look at that country and how they flatten the curve. They did flatten the curve because they just said, hey, listen, this is the way it's going to be, and they flattened it out. Now, we in particularly the United States said, okay, well, we're going to flatten it. Okay, now but there's so much money gone. Let's get back to it. Well, now they're going to have to shut down again. So it's diminishing returns. If we don't do it properly the first time, we're going to have to do it the second time. It's like, what you don't learn in your fundamental movement skills, you'll relearn in rehab. It's that same mentality that we're going to see with this COVID. I mean, it's unpredictable. It's unprecedented. There isn't something that we can say, well, look back on or take information from, because it's new. We're studying about it. We're just finding out about it now. So we're doing our best to go with the flow, but I caution people about that counter argument of getting started back too soon, for economic reasons, because you're going to have a much, much more painful economic reality when you have to shut down 2, 3, and 4 times because you didn't do it properly the first time.
And I think, Matt, what's so interesting is when we talk about bringing the economy back, is pro sports where we need to focus? When I think about investing in the economy and getting people who really need to working again, I'm not thinking about people who can afford to buy tickets to an expensive game and spend money on food there. When I think about the economy, you think about schools, you think about municipalities, you think about parks and recreation where budgets are being cut. So I think what's interesting is everyone's like gung-ho, yay, pro sports are back, but what are we actually doing in cities and towns and communities to make a real difference?
Yeah, great point. And it speaks to the imbalance of education and entertainment that we have in our insatiable appetite to be entertained. And this is what that's all about. We want to be entertained. These sport organizations, let's not kid ourselves, it's an opportunity to take advantage of. Nothing else is going on. Look at the opportunity we have to engage fans, to create new fans, to onboard new fans, to promote our product.
100%.
It's going to be an interesting experiment. It's going to be an interesting experiment to see if that's actually what happens. If people, to Taryn, to your point, are really interested in that, or you know what, I'm more worried about putting food on the table. I don't have time to sit down and watch a mega $1 million athlete compete and get the TV market share and revenues from me watching. I'm not sure where we are as an organization. I'm sure there's lots of people that can't wait. I know there's lots of people that can't wait for sports to start. I know there'll be lots of people that are watching that will be placated by the entertainment. I know it's positive. Sport is positive. I'm a big fan of sports. I'm a big fan of what it does for communities, obviously pulling it together. But I also think we are lacking responsible leadership in some of these cases, and we're lacking, making the right decisions in a studious manner in some decisions. But I mean, these are very smart people who are being advised by the top professionals. But I mean, you can just see the difference even between how Major League Baseball has decided that they're going to do it versus a lot of these other sport organizations. So it's interesting. I don't have the answer, but it's going to be interesting to see what comes of that.
And I think, I know this is a bit of a tangent, and then I'll give it back over to Daryl. I know he's got lots of questions, but what's so interesting is we're talking about entertainment. And is it that people right now need entertainment by watching pro sport players and the pro sport games? Or is it that we really do need to take a step back and focus on also the mental health of people? I feel like there's a huge gap, and there's been a lot of pro athletes recently who have taken their own lives because of mental health issues. And I think that's bringing light to some of the conversations that need to be had. But with everything going on in the world, with the impact of COVID, with how that's affecting people on a very micro level, is there an opportunity for these organizations to talk about mental health and be able to focus on, the players that are involved and the people who are watching and kind of advocate for it?
It's a good question. That is a good question. And is that happening? That's good. We don't know. Or are they concerned about that? So I want to switch gears for a little bit, and let's talk about the youth. In both, this question goes out to all of us here. What do you think the effect will be on youth sports in terms of the athlete pathway? Do you think things are going to change? Matt, you mentioned that the kids that are still playing right now and practicing are the ones that have the means, the money, the expertise, coaches and whatnot. Do you think this is going to change youth sports in terms of the athletic pathway? Like, are we going to go in a good direction, or are some guys going to be saying, forget sports, or are we going to go in the opposite direction? Is this return for the professionals going to get kids more excited because every game matters now? This new format, like a sort of a March Madness, is going to get kids excited and say, God, I want to play again. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think it's an unknown, Daryl. I mean, I don't think anyone has a crystal ball to know what the majority of the population is going to, how they're going to respond and react. What we hope, obviously, is that we build it back better, whatever that means to whatever organization when you're talking youth sport. I think it's been a great opportunity, and we've always said, don't let a good crisis go to waste. I think it's a good opportunity to take stock at, hey, where were we going? And everyone knew that we were going to this pay to play model, and everyone knew that had a significant impact on the participation rates, and everyone knew, as to Taryn's point, what those ramifications beyond just playing sport are: the mental, the physical, the social, the emotional, all of those things in a community. So our hope is that it gets built back better. Our hope is that we take stock and say, hey, listen, what were really the values and currency? What were the drivers? What are the drivers of sport? Did we forget them? Did we take advantage of them? Did they just run away? And we've talked about this lots of times. Did we take our eye off the prize? Did we let free market capitalism kind of erode the virtues and values of sport? We can only hope that we can reflect on that and build it back. But of course, there's going to be people that just want to come back and get right back to what they were doing. Youth sport is basically a drop off for the kids, as Stan Peak said in your last podcast. It's an extension of the parents' ego. Their kids play, so the parents have been doing nothing, the kids have been doing nothing. Let's get right back into it and have little Johnny and Jenny be at the top of their class of championships in the local community, because no one's playing each other anymore. So I'm not really sure what the championship is, but I think there's going to be a blend, Daryl and Taryn, of build it back better, status quo, everything changes the same, and let's be be hyper focused on getting back to the top and doing that.
And I think to add to that, those build it better groups are going to be really successful because people now are going to be paying attention to what their kid is going to be involved in now, as opposed to just signing, just go. And I'm see, you know, in the little circles that I'm in right now, with you know, hockey and soccer, coaches are now forced to make their training fun. Like they have no choice because they don't have a big game next week. So they're now incorporating more fun in their practices or training sessions because they don't know when they're going to start again. So they need to keep these kids engaged. So I don't know if, you know, you've seen that in your circles, Matt, but even in my own training sessions with kid, we start off playing some spike ball. And then, you know, the kids are like, it's like forgetting that it's a workout, and they're like, oh man, they run to the training now. So I think hopefully the kids see that, and with the coaches, they're starting to see this at least and understand that, hey, there's nothing to win right now. It's all about development.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity for coaches to work on the business because they're not in the business.
Exactly.
But do the coaches have the right tools? What's great to see, and Taryn, you know this as well as you, Daryl, what's great to see is the number of webinars. I mean, the number of Zoom meetings, the coach education, all the stuff that used to come at a cost and not be accessible to all coaches is now all of a sudden accessible to every coach. So hopefully a lot of the coaches have been taking advantage of that opportunity and really starting to figure out how they're going to work on the business instead of just going from practice to game to this to that. No time to talk to anyone, no time for continuing education, no time for mentorship, and no time to take their craft to the next level.
And if I could add something, because, you know, I'm usually like the internal optimist. My biggest fear is that, you know, right now, coaches, like you guys have said, are investing in the business and they're looking at the culture and focusing on that. You know, my biggest concern is 6 months from now, they go back to how things were before that because life has resumed to normal in some ways. And they go back to hyper performance and focusing on the wins and all these things. And, you know, Daryl, when you first asked the question, my immediate thought was kids are excited to go back to sports because they miss their friends. They want to have fun. It's social. It's not about the winning. I actually don't think kids mind so much about the lack of games because they're probably still having practices where they get to play among their friends and work on their personal skills and see their own development. So I think from that perspective, youth sports, it's great to have kids learning to work together again and seeing each other and having fun and building their own team culture again. My biggest concern is that parents and coaches are going to get in the way in a couple months and make it just about the winning.
That's a good point when things resume. You know, I also think with the professionals starting back all at the same time, sort of like all the leagues are playing, it's going to give some kids an opportunity to check out some new sports they've never been exposed to. You know what I mean? Just because there's sports, it's going to be like, man, I've never taken interest in baseball, but there's only 60 games. So I can take a look at what's going on, or basketball. Like I know lots of kids that just play 2K basketball over the break here that play hockey are going to be watching basketball now because they know the players. So this is an opportunity for, I guess, kids to get exposed or sports sampling. So
and they have the time. Yeah. Because they're not overscheduled in all their sports. They actually have the time now, which is, again, hopefully a positive that we can take out of it is that, you know, were our kids overscheduled? You know, how are they feeling? And again, I think it's, you know, Daryl, you always talk about this, is bringing it back to the kids and the kids' experience. Like Taryn said, like, what did they want? What did they need? What did they value? How are they going through? I think I understand the economics of a business. You're running a sport organization. You got to keep the staff paid. You got to get registrations in. I understand that. But that can't be at the expense of what the kids value and what they want, because I just don't think, to your point, Daryl, that there is going to be as large of an appetite as there is before. Let's face it, some kids have moved on to do different things. They've discovered other things. It'll be tough for some organizations and some communities to pull people back into this into the sport process, which is another check in the column for why pro sports being shown and shared right now is a good thing, because it does keep that on the top of the mind, to your point.
And I think there's a lot that is commendable about them, some of the pro sports teams having these bubbles and not having any fans in stands or anything like that, because they are, bringing it back to what we were talking about at the beginning, they are showing there is a seriousness to what's going on in the world that they are being respectful about, but they are giving people some, like you said, some of that entertainment so that kids can see what's going on and see the different sports that are available right now.
What are your feelings on these athletes using the arena as a sort of a political stage for, racism or whatever it is what do you guys think of these athletes? Because, T, we were talking about that, where these athletes they're showing, like, they're not afraid anymore to show the world how they feel about things. What are your thoughts on that? What do you guys feel about that? Is this the right place? Is it too much?
Yeah.
T, I'll ask you first. Yeah.
I think it's a great question, Daryl. I think what's really important to look at too is these athletes are role models, and they have the space to really share their voice and get people to listen to them. Whereas I think, what's unfortunate is there's a lot of rioting going on around the world where people aren't being heard, and then it gets a bit destructive, and it gets to be in a very place that makes everything look very negative. Whereas athletes have the opportunity to use this platform in a positive way, to talk about the injustice, to talk about the struggles, to talk about, even within sports organizations, they're calling out the sports organizations to be better. And, I know some people, you hear a lot when they're like, well, not just Black Lives Matter, all lives matter. But the issue right now is when you do the research and you understand what the movement's about is Black people and people of color they face different struggles and challenges that white people don't. And I think it's about bringing the awareness to people to understand that, sometimes you get things handed to you without even knowing it. And it's not that I might get something handed to me without realizing it. It's not that I'm racist. I'm just not cognizant that someone else has to work harder and be better to get maybe considered the same amount of opportunity. So I do think it's important, because they're calling out the organizations, like big organizations, and bringing light to the issues internally, bringing them externally and saying, this isn't okay at a big organization level. It's not okay at a smaller organizational level. And, there was a lot of, 5-6 years ago, there was a lot of athletes standing up, and they were shut down, and they were fired, and they were kicked out of the organizations, and they were wrongfully done so. And I think it's really good for athletes to be the role models and talk about the injustice in the world. So,
well, they definitely have the stage right now, and all eyes are on them. Matt, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I agree with Taryn in terms of the platform and using your platform. I'm a big advocate of using all our platforms. When we look at the virtues and values of sport, what are they? The teamwork, camaraderie, together, communication, all those things that we espouse. So to then tell, professional athletes, any athletes, just to shut up and play, or shut up and dribble, or shut up and do that. Yeah. I don't think I don't agree with that whatsoever. I think you have a platform, it needs to be a discussion. I feel it needs to be a discussion. It can't be just random. It's far more effective if it is a collective, and we've decided on something, or there is a collective push rather than an individual push. But I'm really happy to see, for the guys like Colin Kaepernick, who went through the process and said, this isn't right, and I want to use my platform to show people who isn't right. Look at what happened to him. He was criticized, crucified, ostracized, out of a job. So, and now look, he's like the hero, and people get it now because we see it. It's in front of us. So I think that it's a great opportunity for those athletes to have a voice. I think it's important for the reasons that Taryn said, and you've indicated, Daryl, because people are looking up to them. So when they're speaking to it, then it's easy for a younger, more impressionable person to also speak up to it. And I think that's important. That's what our athletes should be doing. That's what our leaders should be doing. Never mind professional athletes. So I am in agreement with that, using the platform. There are, however, there's always on the other side, the time, the space. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. it needs to be like, you look at Ricky Gervais. I'm not sure if you watched I think it was the Emmys, when he just scorched the Hollywood actors and actresses who are, oh yeah, the environment, meanwhile they've flown there on their private jets. So I think there has to be some level of consistency, credibility, and on the end of the people that are speaking up. I mean, it's not so pervasive in the Black Lives Matter and the athletes, because most of them are just Black Lives Matter, social justice. That is absolutely something that someone can't argue with. Not that the environment also isn't important, but you don't see a lot of the athletes being hypocrites and doing exactly opposite of what they're professing, like you would in the Hollywood circles with the actors and actresses and their environmental pleas. So I think it's twofold. Like, number one, yes, I totally agree with using your platform. Anybody should be using their platform to have a voice. I think that's important. It's what the virtues of sport are, beyond just winning and losing games. There's so much more to it, which we've talked about ad nausea. But it's got to be, Daryl, like you said, it can't be over the top, and it has to be a coordinated effort, because I think that's going to be the best effort and the biggest impact. And I think it needs to be playing for the buck.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah. You know what?
What are your thoughts?
I think it's great. It's a positive thing. It's just, I just don't want them to overdo it. Now, I know that's going to sound crazy, overdo it, but I mean, like, I like at the beginning, or a t-shirt or whatnot, just to represent, but you don't want it in your face. People don't want it in their face all the time. And I think that's when you're talking about the celebrities and whatnot, the actresses and whatnot. People are like, I get it. But you're a gazillionaire. You don't have the same issues that we have, right? So as long as and T said it, awareness. This is the biggest thing that's going to come out of this. Lots of awareness for everybody. We don't overdo it, and I think, I'm not saying we don't do it. I just say we don't overdo it, because people are going to be like, okay, I see it, as opposed to, oh, that's awesome that's going on in the beginning, or every now we see that everyone's acknowledging this.
And I think
and the counter to that, Daryl, is that there's going to be lots of people listening that go, what the hell is he talking about? Don't overdo it. There's people being shot in the streets. There's people being shot.
Well, I don't mean no. Yeah. I know, that's why I'm careful how I say don't overdo it. But I'm just saying it can't be throughout the whole game. You're in. People are there for the game, right?
Right.
And you got the banner. You got it's represented. It's what people need to hear. They need to see it at every point. You can see that in the beginning or the end. Live the life. Walk the walk.
Yeah.
So
good clarification. And I think we're in a unique time in terms of if this had not happened during the pandemic. So if there had not been a pandemic, I'm not sure that, first of all, we would have as many people out there protesting and rioting as we would, because they would be at work. I'm not sure if we'd have as many people paying attention to what's going on, because there would be so many other distractions. NBA playoffs would have been here. NHL playoffs would have been in the fold. All of those things.
Focus on this for sure.
There wouldn't have been that time. So I think it's a great opportunity for this to happen, because it can be so positive, because you got people's attention. And there's no wars going on right now that we've manufactured to distract the population, and there's no sports going on. And that's the thing that worries me most about the return of sports. Are we doing it for the right reasons, or are we doing it because we want to entertain and distract the population from the realities of COVID? So getting back to the beginning of this conversation, I want to hope that we're doing it because we want to inject some fuel into the economy. Like Taryn said, we want to bring some positivity into households.
Exactly. And that's how I feel. It's bring some positivity here, guys. Like, everyone on the same page. We're on the same page now. We want to go in the same direction.
Right.
Now, on that note, what's negative? Give me some negative things about these guys starting back right now. What's negative about these pro athletes starting up?
Well, I think it puts them at risk. Let's start with the athletes. I think it puts them at risk. Whether it's being in a bubble or isolating. I understand the economic driver again for them and for their organizations, but when you see what's happening, and their families, their friends, these are professional athletes that, for all intents and purposes, generalizing here, probably aren't at as much risk as elderly populations, but they are in contact with elderly populations, whether it's family, friends, etc. So just the risk that puts in and around them in their job. It's interesting because we're not forcing anyone else to go back to work. We're not forcing anyone at any other job. We're not forcing them to go back to work. And to Taryn's point, those people are the people that are restarting the economy, and they want to go back to work. And we're saying, no, they can't go back to work. A lot of pro athletes are saying they don't want to go back to work, yet we're forcing them back to work. So I find that kind of juxtaposition a little bit hypocritical, and something that can be a negative. I think that's a negative. And besides that, what does it say to, if you're an uneducated and uninformed amateur or grassroots league, and you use they're doing it without understanding they've got unlimited capital and resources to make sure that the top of the line testing, like Taryn said, the protocols are all in place. If you get some organization that says, well, we're doing it because they're doing it, well, you can't compare apples to oranges, because unless you're spending all that money testing, the individual players every single time, getting the results back in the 24-hour turnaround, you can't compare apples to oranges. So that could be negative as well. The perception of, well, they're returning to play, so we can return to play. I think that's going to be challenging. And number three, you're jamming four sports. So golf, soccer, basketball, baseball, hockey, 5 sports that are usually spread out across the season. You're jamming them into a month. How's that on the you talked about the positive side about the sports sampling and people seeing that, which I agree with. On the other side is that, like, what are we going to be doing? Just stapled to our TVs?
Oh yeah, we're going to be sitting in front. Nobody's going to want to work.
And I think what's interesting is it's during like the summer months when people should be outdoors and being active. And it's like, now we're saying, stay indoors, watch TV, sit on your butt even more. So, and I think, Matt, to add to that, because I completely agree, I think what they're doing is forcing these athletes to come back. And there's a few who have stood up and said, I don't want to. But now you're also putting them in these bubbles and taking them away from their families too. So even though normally during seasons they're on the road and that kind of stuff, some of them have young families now. It's like, well, you can't see mom or dad for 6 weeks, or, it's a bit of now you've been in this bubble as a family. Now we're separating you completely and you're isolated and just with your team. And it's going to be I hope the athletes have the right support in terms of just being able to deal with their new life. Like, they're now living out of hotels with their competitors above and below them, and just their teammates to hang out with, which, I know they do a lot around team culture, but yeah, it is about team culture and communication and building that. So it's going to be very interesting. I think it's hard to predict a lot of the negative stuff without being able to see how they really are managing and mitigating some of that.
And Daryl, lastly, is on Taryn's, to springboard off that, is this another example where we're prioritizing profits over people? Because that's a lot of the issues that have got us into these problems in all levels of sport. And that's what the complaints are all about. Is this another example saying this is about the profits? Or is this about the owners wanting to get, losing 1 year of revenue? These billion-dollar owners, is this about these athletes that are getting paid multi-millions of dollars using 1 year of their revenue? And I get it. Revenue is revenue for everybody, but everyone's in the same boat. And going back to the example, why are you not allowing people to go back to school, back to work, but you're allowing professional sports to go back there? Why is that happening?
That is a big question amongst lots of people. They're watching this like, wait a minute, we can't go back to school, but we're going to have this going on? We're going to have pro sports? How did they justify that? And again, as you said, they've consulted, they have smart people around them. They got doctors, professionals, like organizations like that have set them up. So yes, but why can't we put that effort into figuring out the school thing? You know what I mean? To Taryn's point, so again, that's above my pay grade too. I don't want to jump on that. I'm not a politician, But someone that's an easy argument to say is, wait a minute, you guys are so focused on these guys getting back to play. What about getting these kids back to school so we can go back to work? Right. So on that, I wanted one more thing I wanted to touch upon on Matt, and it was the grassroots point you made about kids being anxious to get back. And do you think watching these pros are going to sort of push that a little bit more? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always that's the lure of pro sports. You want to have kids aspire to be that, and of course they want to get back into play. I think a lot of kids understand their realities, though. I mean, I think they can. You've got young kids, Daryl. They watch a basketball game. They'll turn it off after it's over. Then they'll go out and play basketball for a little bit.
Yeah.
They don't care if it's 2 or 4 friends. I'm not sure that people are screaming to get back to the organized play just yet. But like Taryn said, it's the summertime. They're outside. They're moving. This is typically their time off. So in the rhythm that they know this is their time to do other things. So I'm not sure that that's the case right now, as it may be. But you want to make sure that it's influence property. And again, like Taryn said, no crystal ball. Really tough to predict. Haven't been there. Uncharted territory. We're really going to see a lot of the things that you've talked about, Daryl, and a lot of the points be validated or be rebutted as we go through this fall sports season, I think.
And I hope these pro leagues learn something from this short season, because it's going to create a lot of excitement. Every game's going to be pretty meaningful. Not 160 baseball games that you can't get excited for in August. And they might take a chapter out of the NFL and the college football, where every game is important, shorter seasons, they do other things, you know what I mean? So that's one thing I see on the positive side for hockey. We're not playing 70, 80 games again. It's less, it's 30 games. And we're in a few tournaments or whatnot, but I think that could be a positive. That people see that you don't need to play, so many games. Work on development, have fun, make games more meaningful. So I'm going to wrap it up a little bit here, guys. T, unless you want to add to that. Okay, you know how we always finish? First steps. Who wants to start? T, let's go with you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Daryl. This has been a great conversation. I think for me, my next first steps would really be around, parents understanding that they really need to prioritize the kids in the situation and listen to their kids about what they want, and make sure they're, letting the kids have fun and not letting necessarily what's going on in the pro world dictate how they rush kids back into sports, and really prioritizing, what they feel comfortable around. That was definitely one of mine. The second one was really for a huge opportunity for coaches to work on the business. Really think about how do they want to restructure their programs, focus on culture, focus on personal development, focus on building, not just competence in sports, but the confidence in their teams as they're starting to go back, and making sure they're having fun. And really understanding that, if you're a pro athlete, you really have the opportunity to be a role model and be in the spotlight right now. So use that for the betterment of the world, and hopefully leaders across every country will really understand how we can build the economy and not just focus on the pro world and the entertainment of it.
Very nice. Very nice. Matt?
Yeah, to lever off a couple of points that Taryn made, I think number one is controlling your controllables. One of the biggest problems we have right now as a human race is that we can't control this virus, and it's driving people crazy. And we're trying to, but we can't, because you can't. So instead of trying to and worrying about it, just control what you can control. If your son or daughter can't go back to a full-time schedule in youth sports, well, then have 2-on-2, have them 1-on-1, have them play by themselves, have them just go play, have them take a time off, have them relax, have them do something completely different. There's always something to do, but stop trying to control things that you can't control. I think the second point I want to reinforce that Taryn made was the coaches and the organizations. Now is exactly the time that you should be working on your business, because you're not in your business. I know it's super challenging because you're beholden to registration, you're beholden to people, you're beholden to numbers and all of those things, but there will never be a better time to say, how can we build this back better? So if we're not thinking about building it back better or bringing it back better, that is a first step for organizations, for coaches, for parents, for athletes, everybody in the whole process. And you know, the third point I'll make on first steps is, you know, understand your platform. So what can you do in your platform to have a voice, to share your thoughts and share your ideas? You know, is it avoiding places that don't embrace what you do embrace and don't embrace equitable situations, or don't have a statement or aren't doing that, whether it's a sport, whether it's a sport organization. You know, really take this time to find and align those values between organizations and your own personal values. And yeah, if they're not being shared, then talk about them and feel safe in talking about them, but make sure that it's appropriate. So I think based on our conversation today, those would be, you know, the first steps that we see. And then just lastly, be patient. Nobody is getting ahead right now globally. Like, it's not like one country there's a race to perfection. It's not like one university has the lead on the NHL or NFL draft next year. It's not like one community sport organization has the leg up on the state championship or the provincial championships. We're all in the same boat. So we really have to just be patient. We have to be consistent. This is a virus. It's something that we will never forget for the rest of our lives. And we're all just trying to do the best we can to understand it, learn from it, deal with it. There will be a vaccination. It will come. There's a lot of smart people working 24/7 around the clock from every country in the world. So we really have to make sure that we are being patient with how we're responding.
Those are some great first steps, guys. And as usual, I'm last. I think the professional leads organizations have a huge opportunity now to lead, to demonstrate, to follow the rules. So if they can demonstrate this for youth sports and how serious this is as a matter, like this pandemic and returning, how serious, I think they have a great opportunity to be role models in that sense, that look how serious these guys are in the bubble. Look at the sacrifices these guys have made, the adjustments. You're going to have to make sacrifices and adjustments, guys, if you're going to return to sport. That would be my first steps. Like, all of you, everyone who's doing things trying to return, follow that lead of these pros. If they're making these sacrifices in order to get back and make sure that's safe. Follow the rules. Don't think you're above the rules. That would be my first step. And Matt, I love the be patient. I'm seeing this, guys, and if you know, this is great entertainment. This is enjoy these this next month of sports, but don't be in a rush to get back. Now's the time to have fun and work on fundamentals. And you know, you are going to play again. You will be whatever you're going to be. Just be patient and focus again on being safe and having fun right now, and being active. Of course, being active, guys. I thought this was great. No guests today. Great discussion. We have someone from the NHL coming next week, so we can ask him a few hard questions and how they're gonna roll. Guys, thanks again. If you like this podcast, which I know you will, please share this. We share this. Friends, family, coaches, anyone you think needs to hear this. Guys, thanks for being here today. That was awesome. Thank you. All right. Just go play, guys.
Thanks, Daryl. Thanks, Taryn.
Just go play.